something behind me.
Oh, I see. I thought you were just
Hi,
trying
good
to...
afternoon.
No, it's not going to work unless...
All
Is there an
right.
extra one?
What?
If there was another chair and we could put another cushion.
I'm
It's
good.
okay?
I'm good.
Okay.
She's okay? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. And now is our mission-driven panel. I'd like to welcome our panel members. First, we have Dawn Melchiori for Forefront. She serves as the Chief Program and Policy Officer at Forefront, the Association of Grant Makers, Nonprofits, Advisors, and Allies in the social impact sector in Illinois. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you.
Next is Marie Masella. Marie Masella has more than 30 years of experience in management and providing business strategy and organizational development services to both public and private sectors. Welcome, Marie. And last is Megan Scott, our winner of the Echo. Remember that. Okay. And Megan Scott is with Mega Wild Horse Limited. She's the managing director, founder, and lead strategic management consultant. She has more than 2 decades of experience in strategic management. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
So for the purpose of this session, we're going to be talking about mission-driven panels. And so our first question is, to start, can you briefly describe the organizations you represent, and in what ways do you consider your organizations mission-driven?
Sure. So I'll start. First, thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be part of this panel today. So Forefront, for the first 40 years of its life, was called Donors Forum of Chicago. And for the first part of its history, we were just a philanthropy-serving organization. Our membership was just foundations. And then about 5 years ago, nonprofits were added to our membership roll as full and complete members of our organization. Our name changed to Forefront. And with it also shifted the mission. So no longer was our sole focus on supporting and convening philanthropy in the Chicago and land area, but now we became a statewide organization, and our mission expanded to be able to speak to the nonprofits as well. So that really helped refocus the organization, that instead of on one kind of small little silo of what we call the social impact sector, we now had this broad range of folks that we needed to serve. And so one of the pieces to that was, how do we serve our mission when these are such diverse groups? And so we really undertook a process of where we engaged our allies, our members, and folks who knew nothing about us throughout the state, and said, what does this look like? What is it if we are as a successful organization? If we are true to our mission, what does that look like? And what it looked like for us is that communities in Illinois are thriving because we believe our social impact sector are the backbone to communities. And so really, when we take a look at how we do our work every day, we ask ourselves the so what question all the time. So what are we doing? Are we staying to our mission? Are we staying to our strategic plan? And are we serving the organizations who are members or who aren't members so that they can make a difference in community?
Thank you, Dawn. Anne Marie?
So MITRE is a not-for-profit corporation that operates federally funded research centers. Who's familiar with FFRDCs? Probably those that are my sponsors here, so I'll be careful on that. So MITRE's mission is to problem solve for a safer world. And that means that we work with our sponsors. We're enacted by Congress, by the way. And the safer world is around air safety. It's around healthcare safety. It is around financial, economic, cyber, homeland security. We are engineers, scientists. I think our population is like 60% PhD masters. Very, very smart. And people come to work at MITRE, not because they're going to get rich, but because they want to do meaningful work. We are, as a not-for-profit, we are forbidden to compete for work. We have access to information, proprietary information that allows us to be more of a trusted source and a trusted partner with our sponsors.
Thank you. And Megan?
Thank you all for having me. Thank you to the ASP for the opportunity to share. At Maggot Wild Horse, we live a purpose that aims to advance or facilitate the achievement of the greater good through our service to nonprofit organizations, to entrepreneurs, governments, and international development projects. The purpose, the purpose of our reason for being is tied intricately into our mission, and part of my personal purpose and what it is, the impact that I seek to make in this world. For instance, you will see our slogan being helping organizations to transcend expected levels of success. And so when we can help a government department or an international development project or a nonprofit organization to deliver solutions that's relevant, to help them to plan and to monitor their performance to ensure they are being effective and efficient, when we can offer them solutions that are top-notch at affordable price, and also in blends that makes it affordable and make it accessible, not just to government or international development projects and programs, but also to the small entrepreneur who might not be able to afford some solutions, especially if they were to pay for it face-to-face, in a face-to-face mode versus a virtual and face-to-face blend. Then we find that we are helping to create a social good. And so we are therefore mission driven, because we are helping government to create the impact for a larger mass of intended beneficiaries. We are helping entrepreneurs to drive, if the more businesses we can help in their start, grow, reinvent, then we are also helping to drive economic growth, because we know the small business is the engine of that, and so on. So in those regards, we consider ourselves to be mission-driven, and to be a proud for-profit mission-driven entity. Then we have the sponsored things that we do, such as at this moment, we are trying to get a serious traction for a community of practice for Caribbean immigrant entrepreneurs. And the reason being, in all the diasporic markets, it is found that whilst they come with everything to make them successful entrepreneur, they have the drive, they have what it takes, something happens when they get overseas, and you find they're least likely to start a business, and so on and so forth. I won't go into that thing, but that's a sponsored initiative, because we want to solve that problem. And then we have a for-profit initiative, the NOESIS, which came out of our strategic planning interventions. That is for-profit, but it does have some social component. It's a peer-reviewed magazine and / journal. The intent to promote great literature on Caribbean businesses, both in the Caribbean and in the diasporic markets, to help young Canadians, both Caribbean Canadians and mainstream Canadians, other Canadians, new Canadians, to write, research public on things business, to help consultants, wherever you are, and you're from one of the regions that contributes to the DNA of the Caribbean. So I don't know where in the world we can live out there. Then we want to have you guest writing, authoring things, so establish your professional credibility, and so on and so forth. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So panel members, now, based on your experience with your respective organizations, what unique strategy execution challenges has your organization faced? And then what specific solutions have they utilized?
Well, we support the federal government, so let's talk about problems there, right? I'm sorry, I'm not being offensive, okay? But there is a lot of change going on in the federal government, clearly, and there's a lot of constraints. And there's also a lot more bigger problems that they have to deal with. So from my experiences in how we have to help our government sponsors, we don't call them customers, we call them sponsors. We have to be more creative. And part of that is establishing partnerships so that when we're lacking those capabilities, we can reach out to our partners, and we're doing more partners than we've ever done in the past, so that we can bring them to bear for our sponsors. So internally, from our execution, is we're shifting our mindset. And we like to think we're really smart, but now we're starting to realize that we're not as smart as we need to be. And so a lot of our new work and a lot of how we're supporting is bringing in others that can help us magnify and bring more to bear.
Thank you.
So being a traditional philanthropy serving organization, and when I say philanthropy, so that's both government foundations, operating public family foundations for a number of years. That was kind of our core constituency. So all of our programming, everything we did from the lens of foundations, and really the organization's focus and kind of internal conversation was we lead from behind. We let our members take the initiative, we follow them, we support them. When that changed, we had a change in CEO and opening nonprofits in, it really changed the entire dynamic of the organization and the way in which we worked and the way in which we had to work. One of the big conversations in our field right now is how do we address the power dynamic that exists between philanthropy and nonprofits? How do we build a true partnership if we're really going to make substantial change in our communities? It's going to mean that we are going to have to build a partnership with each other. We have to build trust. We have to break down the power dynamic that exists. And so we first had to model that within our own organization. And there still are times when we struggle and we're challenged because we know we have these two different memberships, but we need to bring them together to be able to see how they can partner and work together and trust one another. So we also had to model that. And so it was really also changing the philosophy of, no, sometimes we are actually going to take the lead and we're going to drag you, sometimes kicking and screaming, along with us so that you understand what the best practices are. And we're going to make it so it's not so scary that everybody can be in a room together and have a conversation. And so it's taken a lot of dialogue. It's taken a lot of times where people have said, you know what, I just can't do this right now. This doesn't feel right to me. And as an organization, we've had to say, okay, that's fine. We accept that, but we're going to continue to move forward in a way that we feel that needs to happen, and hopefully you'll join us again. And so it's really taking that risk, as a membership model, right? We get our money from membership, but taking that risk and saying we're going to do that in order, or we can't fulfill our mission.
Thank you.
So unique strategy execution challenges that we face. I lean towards the unique component since the entire conference have addressed most that we hear. And I don't know the degree to which this is unique, but what I find for small consulting entities such as Maggot Wild Horse Limited, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses, some more seasoned than others, is the problem of trying to achieve synergy when you're collaborating. Because you're small and there's resource constraint, you may have to collaborate to go for, to respond to a call for proposal or something like that. Or it could be that you're a big company with a commitment to supporting small businesses, so you're going to, well, for a benefit, you will partner with them to get your innovation going, or purchase services because they're small and they're more flexible and they may charge you less. But what happens now is you do not have that transactive memory of working together. You don't have a shared history of working together. You may have different organizational culture and emphasis on where your values and ethics point come to play. So you come now to work as a team, and within a short timeline to deliver a solution, and you don't know that because this isn't on John's CV, he also carries this kind of expertise, whether from serving in another industry, some studies they did or something. So you may run around looking for expertise, or maybe spending even more money contracting expertise that sits within. Then there may also be the issue of trust. For instance, when we just started up in Canada, and we reach out to entities that are larger, have been in an area that we serve, but maybe not serving in the international development field. And we'd say to them, okay, we know we can do this. We'd like to collaborate with you. But because of the industries they serve, their approach may be different. And if you try to say to them, now we have to formulate the proposal in this manner, the thinking would be, do they really know what they're talking? We've been in this. We know that. So there's the issue of trust. Can they really do it? And so you lose time. Very recently, we had a project, all women of us too, and we were going to do this all women thing, and we'd be coming back again. And then because two parties didn't know each other, myself and a friend, and so we struggled in the storming process of the project management was longer, because they're wondering, do they know what they're doing? And at the same time, I'm reviewing, and I've discovered this entity is fairly young. I've looked through, and they're talking, and I'm like, should I tell them you're a little kid business? And something like, I mean, I wouldn't do that because it's rude, but there's a bit of aggression, and so that's one. And yeah, I forgot the other one I was going to say. But I think that's a unique one. I think the other one, which is not so unique, is that performance management and measurement, both discipline in terms of doing that monitoring, measurement, and reporting from top to bottom, and that includes the boards, monitoring for the right things too, and also using the performance information, not just using it as a beating stick to say, okay, we set these indicators and we want them, but also to understand that this is a learning process, and with it, you must actively take out what's learned, put resources to that, get commitment to act and do so.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now I'm going to direct these questions to specific individuals on the panel. So Dawn, start with you. So are there any specific challenges relating to board governance that need special attention?
Thanks for the easy question. Yes. So, when I think in the nonprofit industry about board governance, when you talk about, we're a capacity builder. So we have over 850 nonprofits that are members. We see probably 5,000 to 7,000 individuals come through capacity building program work that we do. I think that the thing that most people struggle with is board development and board governance. Mm-hmm. And really, how do you strike that level between the board fulfilling its fiduciary responsibility, keeping high level, focusing on strategy, really focusing on, is this organization staying true to its mission? Does it have a strategic plan that makes sense for what our mission is and for the scope and scale of our organization? That's very difficult, and most nonprofits really struggle with that. And not just kind of the new small nonprofits, but I'm talking, very large organizations that are very successful, sometimes have very difficult time with looking at their board other than they're just the fundraisers, right? Because they're not. They really, your board needs to be actively engaged in all of the aspects that makes up an organization. And it's something that nonprofits really struggle with. And I think it's not just from a staffing capacity and knowledge, but it's also from we don't do a good job as an industry of making sure that people are ready to be on boards. And making sure that they have the tools and the education that they need to be able to serve on boards. We work a lot with the corporate world, particularly around employee volunteer programs, and we're always working with them to, that's the thing. If you want to become that C-level executive, you have to be serving on boards. And so people go on to boards and say, okay, now what do I do? And nobody has the time or, necessarily the depth of knowledge to be able to provide that. And so that's a real problem within our industry that I think we struggle with. And, we're all working towards it. And so I think all of you in the room that kind of do this work and work with the nonprofits, the more you can bring in, what does your board look like? What are your governance standards? What is all this that it takes? I think that more that will help move the industry along.
Thank you. Okay, so now for Marie. So we heard a little bit about C-suite, C-level. So what must leaders do to gain alignment to execution of the strategy?
And this is a reflection of our own organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I run the strategy group for MITRE, and about 3 or 4 years ago, when was the DC conference, 2015? So we did an analysis of all of our work that we did over a period of, I think it was 8 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. And we looked at some of the leading practices for developing strategy in government organizations. And we actually taught this class at the DC conference. But one of the points of it was a strat plan is only as good as the process that you develop it. And what we've learned from working with our sponsors is, we're very good about developing strategic plans. It's in law, and major agencies have to produce it, 1 year after an election. But what we found the most effective was the process they went through in developing it. Did they engage the workforce? Did they engage senior leaders, middle management? Mm-hmm. If I reflect that back to where we are within MITRE, we had a new CEO last year. We have a new strategy, and it's much broader than we were used to, a safer world. You can definitely, we can rally around that, but do we see ourselves in that? And so part of the alignment is ensuring that we give that communications back to the C-suite that help us understand where we fit in this. I know I fit, but we have to be clear in the communications about it.
Gotcha. Thank you, Marie. And now Megan. So Megan, from the perspective of C-suite still, what must leaders do to gain commitment to execution of the strategy?
Gaining commitment is always going to have to do with communication, and also to have something that appeals to the person beyond monetary rewards. What is in this strategy for me in terms of the individual and what I would like to see change in the world or in my life, my situation, or within the organization itself that I serve? What is my role? What am I going to do, or what should I do in order to contribute to the success of such a strategy? Having done so, you must also ensure that the strategy is understood, that it's clear, that it's understood. You must ensure that it is communicated to all levels, and of course you must have the champions, the influencers, and so on. From the bottom up, I've seen persons with very, very junior role causing a CEO to have to demit office, yes, because that person came with a completely different culture, did not understand the strategy, a completely different industry, and just went wrong, would rub the staff wrong, and a very junior member of staff came to me and said, you know, the minister lived at my aunt's home, and this lady is out of order, and she'll not be here next week. I thought he was kidding. Monday morning, she was summoned away. So you have to make sure that you understand the strategy, that is communicated, and that you have influencers, people, that your line managers, that all the staff. Don't assume that you have to have complex strategy language. You can explain it to the person who pluck the grass outside to say, when you keep the ground clean, it does this for the reputation and image of our building, it does this for our health, and it helps us, and trickle it right up, things like those. So it's the communication, having the advocates and the evangelists to rally support.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to save my last question. So now I'm going to ask the audience, what questions do you have for the panel members? And Neelima.
I'm seeing this kind of clash sometimes between the executive director and some people on the board who think that they're in charge.
Oh, this is being taped, right?
Live stream.
Live stream. Oh, boy. Okay. No, that's exactly right. And so I think there's 2 points. I think first one goes back to education and having board members really understand what their role is. Their role is not to figure out, you know, what kind of copy paper you should be buying and who the supplier should be from. If the board is in the nitty-gritty of day-to-day operations, or if they're looking, they want to know every month where are we at on, these certain strategies. That first is the fault of the executive director, and how you onboard individuals into your board. And so really setting that standard at the beginning, so when new people come on, they understand what their role is. This is kind of the board culture. This is how we work. And then I think, the second part of that, though, is having an executive director feel empowered that they can do that. And because ultimately that executive director's job, they report to the board of directors, right? And so there's always that kind of give and take. A lot of times though, sometimes when we have to make decisions that are very difficult, staff is like, well, can't we just kick this up to the board and let them do it? It's like, no, you can't. We have to keep the board where the board needs to be. They have to provide the strategic direction. They have to make sure that we are staying to our mission and that we have the funds available to be able to do that. And so really setting the stage right in the beginning and making sure that that onboarding of that new board member is correct. And then every year making sure that you're going over those rules and regs, because sometimes people stay on, they can do a couple of terms. They tend to forget, and they get more comfortable, and they get to know the staff, and they're like, oh, well, I can just call the staff member and say, hey, why are you doing this? And so it takes a lot of management, and that's a big piece of an executive director's position. And it's one of those that not everybody is always well educated about.
Thank you.
Wow.
Touching that one. All yours.
I don't think that, so I agree in part. So a big piece of the executive director's position is stewardship. And it's stewardship of donors, it's stewardship of the board and the work that they do. But I also think another piece of that is about leadership, is about that when we tend to look at the CEO just as the chief fundraiser, and that's what they're responsible to do. They're only responsible for making sure that, you know, we have the funds available. I think that can lead a void within an organization, because that person also has to be, you know, the manager of all the staff and setting the culture, making sure that people are staying on mission, staying on plan. We're evaluating. You know, it's an immense role, and they have a number of different positions. As to the second piece about the board, are you talking about the president of the board, correct? And the executive director being like a co-CEO?
Yeah, so you've got that term CEO, Chief Executive Officer, but in the nonprofit sector, I'm seeing more and more some clarification that explains that the CEO is actually a chair that's two people wide that includes the chief staff officer, if you will, and the chief elected officer, the two of them together. And again, it relates to this idea that stewardship means the executive director is responsible for the mission of the organization. So I'm trying to see, based on your own experiences, to what extent you might agree with that concept.
Right. And to be honest, I don't really see that happening kind of in our marketplace. What I really see more is that the head of the board, the elected head of the board, is a partner with the CEO, is someone there to provide counsel, to manage, to make sure that that CEO is functioning correctly and within that organization, but not as it's kind of a dual role, because I think you get into interesting waters if you look at that. Because a couple of places where I've seen kind of that, where there's not those clearly defined lines, that's the CEO and that's their job, is to run that organization, and they report to the board and they report to the chair of the board, but there's a clear delineation. That can fracture staff, it can fracture the board. And I think at the end of the day, it could cause more harm than good if there's not those two distinct roles. That being said, they better be partners, and they don't have to like each other, but they have to be partners in the work, and they both have to be committed to the mission of the organization.
If I put it this way, and if it makes sense, I would say, generally, I would give ownership of the operations plan and delivering those deliverables to advance the mission to the CEO, whilst the president or the board chair would be responsible for the delivery of the corporate strategy plan and for monitoring and evaluating the CEO on the delivery of the operations plan. And if the board is busy doing the leading and monitoring and tracking and assessing and contributing to the strategic agenda, if they were to focus on that and not get busy into operations, unless it's a very small nonprofit where that's not properly staffed, so you have to be up and down, then they would not have that role confusion. But because they often trip from putting the strategic agenda onto what they ought to do, and as Dawn says, focus on fundraising and some other things, that's where the trouble comes in. So if the strategic agenda is put back and the board's role is clarified there, then I think that should clear the confusion.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
My question would go to Mary. How would, supposing I was the CEO of the company, and usually these are, I'm speaking from the background of government companies down in Africa, and you have political board appointees. And you figure out their lacking capacity, strategy management. How would one easily go about that? Just share experience.
Which is my job right now. So help me make sure I correctly state this, that in a government organization, and there's political appointees, and you have to help them where strategic management capabilities are lacking. Is that? That's a loaded question, and that's also my job. And I also invite others that are in the government right now that can also help with answering your question. Goodness, where to start? So I think there's a basic education, and a basic education of what is expected from those within government that have to be compliant. So let's put the compliance out of the way, because that's one thing that we're very good about. But then the other pieces around what's the value of doing this? What's the value of having strategic management capabilities in an organization, especially a very bureaucratic organization that has a lot of oversight, right? So an example that I can tell you off the top of my head was a large government agency that wanted to really push forward their strategic management capabilities. And they are responsible for, a lot of them are accountants, so I could probably can figure out what kind of agency that is. And they're spread out all over the country. And so we did like a boot camp with them, and we actually put in place little like pilot sessions with them so they could practice, and we called it test and learn. Like, how do you do a logic model? Let's test and learn what that logic model would look like for your organization, for your division. What did we learn from that? And then we did a debrief, and we had it virtual across the country to talk about what happened. And that over time allowed them to gain, small degrees of confidence. They now have a cadence where they're able to, on an annual basis, kind of do a little quick environmental scan. Now, with the political appointees, we almost have to teach them what to expect, right? Because they'll come in and they have an agenda, and they have an agenda they need to do in a relatively short period of time. And so, and teaching them, okay, this is going to help you achieve what your agenda is. But I invite those that are in the government, that are in this space, to chime in.
Sometimes it boils down to
Oh.
That's what he was saying. Sometimes it boils down to just depending on the nature of the issue, because it could be that it's not just about knowledge. Well, I should put that in quotation, because perhaps the person feels that they know what is to be done. True. So they almost storm into the entity to get things going, but you may have to somehow speak truth to power. And so you may have to study that individual, see what it is, see how you can maybe befriend that individual, and as Marie was saying, find out what is of greatest interest to them, and then tie the conversation to that as an opening to discuss what's going fine, what's not going, little issues, and slowly get into the conversation. It depends on the individual and the culture putting all of that, because sometimes it's more than not knowledge. But another time, if it's not working, you just have to be bold-faced, go face that lion and speak to the lion. Yeah. For the greater good. It's true.
Yeah, gotcha. And any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to ask my last question, and it is, so panel members, what best practices and strategy execution would you want to share with the members?
So, a about 4 or 5 years ago, MITRE was always very proud about being in the Fortune top places to work. We started falling off that list maybe about 5 years ago. And we took a hard look on some of the reasons why. And we decided to really focus on our employees in a different way. Now, we've always been, you know, work-life balance. Those are like our hallmark of what attracts people. We got rid of the annual performance management process. And we instituted, now as a nonprofit, you also probably know you have limited overhead, right? We took funds out of our indirect, and we made sure that every employee and their manager has the opportunity to talk about their development every single month. We no longer do an end of the year employee evaluation, because we should know by the end of the year at this point, right, how well they're doing.
Right.
But it's really focused, and we call it clear conversations. Now, we still have to do some sort of thing at the end of the year in order to compensate them, but it's not a peer ranking. It's about their own individual development. That was radical for us, for, you know, an 8,000, you know, employee. We're now in year 3 or 4. We're in year 4, and every year we've learned something. And I feel quite proud of that. And I think when I look at the employee satisfaction scores, they're like 98% satisfaction. So I think we did something really well in shifting and navigating differently.
Thank you.
Well, I'll jump on the resource constraint and speak what I think is applicable to government, nonprofits, development projects, entrepreneurs, consultants like me. And for this point, it's not the one thing, but I'll just focus on this one, the collaboration, internal collaboration and sharing of resources interdepartment for getting things done, sharing of results with other entities and partners, and also celebrate. And don't just, when the desired result has been attained, you jump out on the platform and announce and forget all the people who helped you to achieve your results. And so I'd say do that and make those collaborations with the different entities, whether you're a big business collaborating with small businesses or consultants collaborating with each other. Don't wait until you have a performance, then you come together. Try to do even little things, volunteer things together to get that history of working together, collaborating, sharing resources, and so on.
So I think I'm going to stay on the theme that we have up here about internal employees and collaboration and communications. And so I think one of the big pieces that I've been at my organization about 2.5 years. And so when I came into my role, I think there had definitely been a way of which things were done, and the way the strategic plan process was done, the way the theory of change process was done, and how we do operating plans every year. And staff wasn't really involved. They were kind of handed it and said, this is what it is, go do. And they couldn't see where their role was, and there wasn't that communication. And so we've really broken those barriers down to where now each individual team, that they help develop the operating plan before even the board sees it. So it's really going through an internal review process where we challenge each other to say, okay, you want a new program, you want a new something, so what? So how does that get us to our end goal? And you know, we have to defend it to our other peers to say, yeah, I think this makes sense. This is why we're going to do what we're going to do. So really, and then the third piece was breaking down barriers. So you always have different departments. Well, you know, administration does administration and accounting, and finance is doing their thing, and the policy advocacy team is doing that, and the membership team is doing that, and bringing everybody together so that they can understand each other's job functions and what people needed to do on a day-to-day basis to get the work done, to make sure we're fulfilling our mission. When we collapsed all that and started to build more of that internal team building and really focus on culture, really focus on internal hospitality, that I think made a huge change and commitment to people wanting to be at work every day.
Awesome.
If I may say one last thing, with all of what we've said, nothing is going to happen to deliver the desired results unless we have that performance management and measurement system and use it effectively for managing change, for learning and adjusting the strategy and so on, and allocating rewards and so on.
Okay. Well, thank you, panel members. Great job and great discussion. Thank you, audience, as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So feel free to give us feedback on the survey on your app, as well as the next sessions are about to begin at 2:15. Thank you very much for your time and have a wonderful day. Safe travels home.